Hey friends, thank you so much for watching. I want to introduce you to David Haubein. David Haubein, he's 73. He doesn't look it. I look older than he does. But anyway, I call it the Landman because he has done so much with conservation. He's been a hunter his whole life. He has taken care of grazing. He's done farming. And he's been involved in a lot of businesses. He's on boards for everything. He's won a lot of prizes for his conservation efforts and his knowledge and what he's done for the environment. You're really going to get a lot out of this episode. We cut it off at 1:45, but we could have spoke for 5 hours. So probably be a part 2 coming. Anyway, thank you very much. We are cleared for takeoff.
The light comes strong off the ceiling. It makes everybody look bald, on top. And I did run a light to hit off a lamp, to hit off the deal, but it still looks funky. But
well, so for me, it's not the lighting. Well, everybody, I am here with David Haubein. David, I've known you, believe it or not, for almost 40 years.
I know.
It's kind of crazy to imagine. I was shoeing your fiance's horses in 1988, and next thing I know, Tanya Duvall turned into Tanya Haubein, and I got to see kind of some of this empire that is Haubein, what do you call it, Enterprises, or?
Well, believe it or not, that was a name for a while, but that was dissolved, and all that's left from the old family organization is Haubein Farms, Inc. And my parents are both gone now, but my brother and I came home from college in the mid-'70s and worked with them, and in the 80s, we got in the food business in the early 80s, and we started coming up with different company names. Our first plant was over at Jasper, Missouri, and we called it Jasper Popcorn. Then we built a cereal plant in the early 90s in Joplin, and we changed the name of the company to Jasper Foods. And then we sold those two in 99 and started yet another company called Jasper Products. And it was a beverage plant, a high shelf-stable, long shelf life type high protein beverage plant.
Like Muscle Milk.
Yeah, Muscle Milk, soy milks, almond milks, all those types of things. And that plant, all those plants are still in existence, and they're doing well, I think. And we did a lot of private label, for the store brands and that type of thing. And Muscle Milk was one of the products we manufactured at Joplin, and I think they still do, maybe. But
you grew up farming, right? As a kid?
Well, my father was we had a general store there right where I live. I'm the 5th generation in that spot at a little town called Minor, 20 miles south of where we're sitting here.
Right.
And right now we're on the ranch headquarters. We're just south of Jericho Springs, 3 miles. And this ranch is called Round Rock Ranch. We put it together continuously from the 70s and still have added a little to it in the last few years. And the unique thing about this project, this was after I had gotten out of the food business in 11. I was keep me organized here, Chris. Yeah.
When I first went to your house to shoe horses and eat supper and meet you, there was a Haubein implement right across the road from the house that you still live in.
Correct.
And it's a big farm. And is that where you were born and grew up?
Yeah, I was raised right there. I lived in the house on the east side, east of where we live.
Okay.
The house I live in now that you had dinner with us, that was my great-grandfather's house, built in 1920.
Wow.
And Tanya and I, when we got married, she was a flight attendant, and then we had businesses going in Joplin and Jasper.
I thought it was flight goddess.
Yeah, well,
whatever. Huh?
Stewardess, whatever you want to call them. I asked her, I said, do you want to live out here? I mean, we could build down in Joplin because that's where most of our activity is now. And she said, no, I like it in the country. And so
she was a country girl.
We've been there for 35 years. Actually, in 2025 was our 35th anniversary there.
Okay. So I guess I had shot for her a little while before I met you then. So I must have met you around 90.
Yeah.
I
think that's right.
All right. And so as a child, were you driving tractors?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We that history there at Minor. First it was a general store, just
Okay.
a general store, and then Dad always informed us. There's a sign on the front of the store. We recreated the original sign, and he said, "Well, you did it wrong. It says L. Haubein and Sons." And he said, my father was the only son that joined the business, and so it was L. Haubein and Son.
Okay.
So, and that was started in 1902.
Wow.
And at first it was a general store. Then they added, believe it or not, International Harvester. And they sold, binders and tractors and things like that. And then Dad, his father died young at 50. And he came home and worked in the store. And in 1950, he signed up with Massey Harris. And they were, that was back in the early days of self-propelled combines. And he thought there was a big future in that. And he became, actually, there was one year in the 60s, he was one of the bigger combine dealers in the country.
Wow.
And the Massey did have a good combine for years there. And Kenny and I grew up, I have one brother, and that's my only sibling. And we grew up in that business. And of course, we drove tractors from about as quick as we could hold on to the seat or hold on to the steering wheel. And I remember I came in for lunch one day, and I think I was 12. And Dad goes, why aren't you out in the field sitting on the combine? He said, we could have brought you lunch. And I said, well, the combine's still running. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, Kenny's running it. And he was 9, and he was small enough to push the clutch down. He had to jump off the seat and hold on to the steering wheel with both hands and push with all his might, and he could get a clutch. But he's always been a gearhead ever since, and we enjoyed the farm equipment business, and my dad finally retired from that in '97. And previous to that, Kenny and I had moved into the food business, so we were already gone there.
So what did you do in college? What was your degree?
Well, actually, I majored in public administration. It was in the business school, and I thought I wanted to be an attorney. My favorite uncle was an attorney. And I actually went to law school for a period of time, and one day I was sitting in class, and I looked around at all my classmates and fellow students, and I said, I don't want to spend a career working with these people. And I came home, and that would have been in the winter of 74, 75.
Okay.
And I came home, and I said my father couldn't quit smiling and my mother couldn't quit crying. And then my brother followed me out of college, and we all started working in the family business then.
And so how did you take that into production of food?
Well, that's an interesting story. I actually 2 years after I got home from college, DeKalb, who we had been a DeKalb seed dealer for years. I think we had a 40-year span where we were the DeKalb seed dealer around Lockwood, and they bought Lindsay Manufacturing, which was the second biggest center pivot manufacturer in the country. And I told Dad, I said, I think irrigation's going to be significant, and I think we ought to talk to him about a dealership.
So pivots were not nearly as common back then, huh?
Oh, no, there weren't hardly any around.
So now when you fly, I mean, there are circles throughout the country. You just see all these circles that are pivots.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah, and you get in western Kansas, and it's nothing but circles.
Right.
And so we actually, to go see a dealer, when we talked to Lindsay, they said, well, we'll send you to a dealer and you can talk to him. And we had to go to Great Bend, Kansas.
Oh, my.
So that was pretty interesting. And we signed up with Lindsay, and I put several pivots in and sold them actively there for several years.
And were you drilling wells as well and stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, we didn't drill the wells. We
just had to be part of it.
Yeah, we hired that done. But we did put in a whole system for them, pipeline and all that stuff. And And that morphed into getting to know all the bigger farmers, who we were talking to them about pivots and things like that.
Real quick, what would a pivot be worth at that time? How much?
$20,000.
What's a pivot worth now?
Oh, you mean what does it cost?
I guess
$150,000.
Man alive, so 7.5 times.
Yeah. Yeah, we were developing ground with water and everything when I started for around $300 an acre or less. In other words, all your costs, drilling the well, putting the pipe in, putting the pivots up. And when I would do those calculations, I would only figure where the water hit. In other words, a quarter section you water about 135 acres.
So the little bitty corners are...
Yeah, you have corners
taken out
that
of-
aren't covered, and I never considered that irrigated ground,
Sure.
And and that, of course, see, the early 70s, or in the 70s, it was kind of an inflationary time like now.
Mm-hmm.
And land was going up. We bought some land then. Well, this place was in $450 range, I think.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
But some of these pasture grounds that he had bought 10 years earlier paid $75 an acre for them.
Man.
Several of them around here. And it just, that's just how inflation, it's one that taught me a lesson pretty early. Land is a pretty good hedge against inflation, but still it doesn't make it any easier to buy at the time.
No.
Because and we went through the high interest rates. We bought the first $1,000 farm, $1,000 an acre north of Lockwood, and we thought we got it owner financed for 8%, and we thought, well, that's such a hot financing deal.
Can't say no, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't really going to cost us all that much. And see, we'd gone through that period in the early '80s of double digit interest rates. It was well, I always call it the depression, the farm depression, and it was a farm depression. A lot of people went out, and so things were tough, and we grew popcorn in 1982. So that was one thing about pivots. If you had irrigated ground, you could get unusual contracts with specialty crops. And like one of the things we've always done on our operation from the get-go, and to this day we do it, is we grow, most of our soybeans are grown for seed.
Okay.
Because we have the assurance of irrigation and the assured crop. So I was growing registered and certified seed back in the late 70s and early 80s. And but in 83, we were growing popcorn, and this is morphing into food. How did you get into food?
Oh, yeah, no, that's the question.
And so we were getting stiffed by the processor, and he was up in Iowa. And
so by being stiff, he'd make an order.
well, he
he'd
wasn't
deliver,
paying us.
and then he wouldn't.
We'd shipped him most of the popcorn, and we weren't getting paid.
Oh man.
Which gets you a little bit nervous, when it's 600 miles away, and you haven't gotten paid a dime for it. But so I rode up with the truckload, one of the last loads up there, and this guy was, as we got in the popcorn business after that, but he was a strange duck. And he just didn't show up that day. He knew I was coming. I'd made an appointment, and he didn't show up. So I spent the day, and they weren't unloading us. They weren't busy, but they didn't unload us. And so I just nosed around the whole property. I went in every nook and cranny and watched the machinery run, and just really got a feel for what it took to process popcorn. And this guy wasn't really he just processed bulk popcorn. Basically he had cleaning equipment and that type of thing. So I come home, and
did you guys unload?
oh yeah, we got
And you got paid.
unloaded, and we finally got paid.
Okay, all right.
And so we were talking one night, and I said, sometimes I think we ought to become a middleman. Farmers have always cussed the middleman
Right.
for taking all the money, and I said, maybe we should consider being a middleman. And of course, Dad, the unique thing about him was he was a gung-ho kind of guy. He was like a lot of those World War II vets. They were gung-ho on everything. And in fact he was gung-ho on things that ended up biting him. But overall he had pretty good viewpoint and things. He built one of the first bulk fertilizer plants in the country in Lockwood on the rail. That's back when rail did everything. We did that in 1962.
Wow.
He built a bulk fertilizer. And he had, when we were little, he became a fertilizer dealer, and it was all in 50 and 80 pound bags.
So you got to heft some of them around.
Well, he just about worked himself to death. He would work in the store all day, and he'd get in the truck, and he'd drive to East St. Louis, Alton, Illinois. Olin Matheson had a plant up there, and they'd load his truck, and while they were loading his truck, he would get a nap, and he would drive down. He'd do this all in the night, and he said that truck, like I-44, you've probably been to St. Louis several times. There's a place called Devil's Elbow, and all those names are part of Old 66. You don't really notice them on I-44. But he told me one time that in the dead of summer, he was hauling this fertilizer, and that old IH truck he had a throttle on it where you could set the throttle. I mean, it wasn't cruise control, it was just a throttle, And going up those hills in the middle of the Ozarks, and see, it was 2-lane, and he said, yeah, I got out, and it was so hot. He said, I was standing on the running board with the truck just
while it was running,
while it was lugging up the hill. And he said, I looked back, and there were car headlights for 3 miles as far as he could see.
Oh, man.
But he did that. I mean, it was a killer for years. And that was the dawn of using fertilizer in the 50s.
So a very innovative thing.
Right after the war.
What did he do in the military, or in World War II?
Well, that was interesting. He was younger. He got out of school in 1944. And they sent him to Texas, and he signed up for the Army Air Corps. Well, they didn't really, at that stage of the war, the Air Force was already pretty well under control, and so they needed trainers, and he never got a what do you call it? He never was made an officer.
Okay.
He was a private the whole time he was in the military, but they made him a drill instructor.
Oh, yeah.
He had this voice. Everybody, in fact, my friends used to say, my gosh, your dad's voice sounds like, it's coming out of heaven or something. I mean, it carries weight, He had a real good voice. And he trained 3 sets of cadets, was basically what he did in the military. And when I say train, it was boot camp. He did boot camp for 3 sets.
Okay.
Of guys, and they never gave him any rank because
man.
See, all the non-coms, the sergeants and that were in battle. They couldn't spare any of them, and so my brother and I always smile and say we were raised by a drill instructor.
You were,
and we were.
Yeah.
And he'd get after you and he'd go chin up, chest out, shoulders back. He'd say quit slouching, and all this stuff.
Yeah. They were a tough generation.
They were tough, and they weren't afraid of hard work. I mean, that killer deal he did about hauling fertilizer and running the store, that was quite a deal. And
were you alive at that time? You weren't yet?
Well, I was a child. I mean, I was born in 52.
52, okay. So
yeah,
you kind of remember that.
Well, slightly. And, those were the serious drought years.
Were they drier than we are now?
As you've listened to this episode, you heard David talk about the pork that Cameron and Jacqueline are raising, and it's being raised right here on the farm that you see all around me. It's cjwpinoranch.net. They raise pork. They have cows. They put them on this rotation. No antibiotics, no pesticides, no herbicides. They are being raised as close to the way God intended as possible. And you can tell when you taste it, it's just amazing meat and really good for you. So anyway, if you want to be healthier, If you want to feed those you love a little bit healthier, check out cjwpinoranch.net. Thank y'all.
Oh yeah.
Way-
A lot of the records you see, like the hottest, like Fort Scott was 120 and 52, I think, and there were a lot of records set. And
And I'm sure your dad's truck had good air conditioning.
yeah, well, that's why he was standing on the running board at
Yeah, of
night
course.
and only running at night. But anyway, back to the food transition. I talked about being a middleman, and Jim Cook was running the fertilizer plant over at Jasper for us.
Yeah, I used to do his horses.
Yeah, and Jim was a good manager for us, and he and I had a good relationship. And I said, Jim, are you in the mood to take a cruise up through Iowa and Nebraska? And this would have been the winter of 1982, 83. And so he and I got in the car, and he said, what are we going to do? And I said, we're going to go look at popcorn plants. So we went and looked at all these plants under the guise of, hey, we raise popcorn, and maybe we'd like to consider raising it for you.
Sure.
And of course, these guys, they took us around all their plants and everything. And so we spent a night at Des Moines on this. It was a multi-day trip,
Mm-hmm.
No cell phones or anything like that. And I call in and I told Dad, I said, well, we're in Des Moines. We're going to hit another place or two, and we'll be home probably the day after tomorrow. And he said, well, you better figure out something to do. I bought that plant across from the fertilizer plant, and that was an old pet dehydrated milk plant, and the most recent use it had was the Sea Shark boat plant. They built fiberglass boats there.
Oh, wow.
And that it had sat empty for a year or two. And so he had purchased that property and that plant, and he said, well, let's just get in the popcorn business. And so I researched all the cleaning, and of course I'd seen all the cleaning and all the various techniques they were using and everything. We got a gravity table, which helped on quality. You could sort out the lighter weight kernels and things like that. And of course everything was designed to be gentle on the corn and that type of thing. Well, that first year our first crop was 1983. And there was a severe drought in the Corn Belt that year. And I contracted, I don't know how many acres. We weren't too bullish, I mean, we had to go sell the stuff. And I contracted several hundred acres, maybe close to 1,000 for 10 cents a pound. And that drought caused it to go to 16 cents a pound.
Wow.
So we could have, our best bet would have been to not keep any of it and just sell it all right out of the field and start the next year.
right away.
So we kept some to start trying to market.
So you
some.
weren't growing your own popcorn?
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
not
We
all
grew
of
it also, but no, we at our peak, we had growers in western Nebraska, eastern Colorado, western Kansas, around here a fair amount, and it paid to spread it out like that because the way the weather was. You could have a real bad crop someplace and be in trouble. And,
Right.
But it was 1983 was our first year.
Wow.
So it was tough sledding, getting into any place. And actually our first connection was at a funeral. And one of the guys there was Jeff Kohlmeyer, and it was one of my aunts had married a Kohlmeyer, and we were at this funeral, and Jeff was produce manager for Smitty's Markets in Springfield. They had 3 or 4 of them in Springfield. So we started talking. He said, what are you guys up to? And we said, well, we're raising popcorn. And he said, we've started a big bulk area in our stores. Would you like to supply the popcorn for our bulk areas? That was our first entry into a grocery store. And Jeff and I ran into Jeff just a year or so ago. I mean, he's still a wild man, and he coaches. Oh, he's sports referee for youth sports, and he's in some national deal. But anyway, we got into that way, and then
And was this Haubein popcorn?
No, it's called Jasper.
Jasper.
popcorn.
Okay.
And we thought about Clovis, but we didn't think.
Which Clovis
there was
your dad
already
made?
Orville. You know.
Oh, right.
So we didn't think Clovis would go too far, so we went with Jasper. And then that's funny that name stuck. But see, Jasper's kind of a catchy name.
That is a good name.
So we went popcorn, Jasper Foods, Jasper Products. And to this day, I go, well, let's go talk to Jasper, you know. I mean, so anyway, we hired a fraternity buddy that had been in the food business as our sales guy, and he was a pretty crazy guy. And I did a lot of sales work with him and stuff. I'd work all week at the implement store or the farm, and then I'd go to food shows on weekends and
Did
stuff.
you enjoy that?
It was a good experience when you're young. I mean, I flew all over the country with Dale, and we did all kinds of stuff, and it was a real experience. I mean, we hired a broker in downtown New York City. That's something, driving around New York City. We didn't know what the heck we were doing, and but we got it. We started going to the private label food show in Chicago every year. And the first year we went, it was fold-up tables. And if you had a little banner stuck on the wall behind you, that was your logo.
That was your booth, huh?
The last few years, Kenny, they've quit going to it because they can barely keep up with the demand. I mean, they don't have to sell their ability to manufacture anymore. But the last year they went to that private label show. That's probably been 7 or 8 years ago. That booth cost $75,000 to rent that, and it was a major deal. But that was their big show of the year. And see, that's what we did. We manufactured for the store brands, the other startup brands. Like Muscle Milk was a startup brand, and we were the first manufacturer for them. And Premier, which is in all the big wholesale clubs, they develop Premier at Joplin and manufacture most of that there. But that was how that growth pattern happened. And
Did you enjoy the food business?
well, one reason we always got along in family businesses
That's a good thing to know.
is we had enough stuff going on that everybody had their area of expertise, and you would have knockdown, drag out arguments about the path to take, but yet the person that was in charge of that area always typically had the final say.
So one would have the popcorn.
Well,
and one would have-
not really that way. It was my brother got an accounting degree from Mizzou,
Okay.
and he's a great accountant. They call him the spreadsheet king. He had special monitors put in his office. He would make spreadsheets. He had to buy a special printer to run these spreadsheets that were almost 3 feet long.
My.
And anyway, he was good at that part and working with the sales guys. And my expertise was envisioning the plant, the layout, how to get all the machinery in it, how to source all the oddball machinery that comes with all the different things you do. And I just always had a good feel for how something would function and that came from growing up on the farm,
Sure.
and seeing what was working and what wasn't working. And like on this facility here, this is one of my last hurrahs here, after I retired. And I retired in 2011, and that was the month before the tornado hit Joplin.
Right.
And
you retired from pretty much Jasper Products. It was the last place you were.
Jasper Products.
We're
And
really going in.
The implement dealership, we had retired. Dad had retired from that in '97. That was gone, and so my full focus was on this ranch and farm. And on the row cropping part, I mean, I'd done all the development, like the pivots and that. Our farm consists of 50% irrigated row crops and 50% forages.
So how many pivots do you guys run?
20.
20. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
We've got about 8 wells.
That's a
and
lot of pieces to keep running, isn't it?
I still manage all that, you know, and I designed all the layouts of all the systems and everything. And part of the deal that worked out really well with that is, and it kind of, I always kind of just tried to step back and see how things were going and what made sense, you know, to proceed, you know. And we were very fortunate. We put together a lot of nice properties over the years, but we weren't super concentrated. We were strung out, you know, from here to where I live, over 20 miles, and the wells are strung out across that area. And the other neat thing is we have forages typically close to these pivot systems, you know, and we'll typically have 2 or 3 circles per well.
Okay.
And so I had, we were working with 2 good row crop guys that were doing our row cropping, but we made when we got together with these fellows, we said we want to go 100% no-till. This was 25 years ago.
Wow. Wasn't that popular then,
and
was
no,
it?
it wasn't. In fact, the whole time, I always was dinking around with different techniques and stuff. And back in the 70s, in 1980, we started trying to no-till soybeans in wheat stubble. And this is before GMO and, you know, glyphosate and all this stuff. And we had some fertilizer plants. You know, we had Jasper, Lockwood, and Pierce City. And I worked with Jim over there. And the Ortho guy, Ortho made Paraquat, which was the only, quote, burn-down chemical available in 1980.
A burned down chemical is like
To kill the existing vegetation that's in the field.
So basically a Roundup.
No, well, Roundup works differently. Paraquat just literally burnt everything.
Okay, all right.
And so I got to know the ortho man, Ted, and he and I started experimenting, and I got better. We took on the Kinsey line, and that was a John Deere clone, more or less, for the planters, and got good coulters and you know, down pressure systems and real heavy frames and stuff, and we learned that no-tilling double crop was just so efficient as far as moisture and everything else, and getting the work done in no time. And plus, we found out it really enhanced harvest time. You know, these other guys that were still tilling everything up, we'd have these wet falls, and they'd be rutting around, and all of a sudden, our falls were just a breeze. You know, we weren't in the ruts, and we were getting good yields and everything. And so, by the early '80s, we had pretty well proven that no-till double crop was the way to go. And part of that, we learned to even control the weeds in the wheat. We'd use a 2,4-D or something like that while the wheat was growing and kill all the weeds in the wheat. So you started with a clean field.
So what are your thoughts on the modern chemicals? Do you think it's caused a lot of our problems?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I don't. We still use glyphosate. I might take a step back about entering into the modern chemical world, because once we committed to no-till, you know, you are using chemicals for burn down and weed control and everything, and but you're really helping on erosion tremendously.
Sure.
By not stirring the soil. So in the mid probably 2012, 2013 or so, this soil health thing was starting to emerge, regenerative agriculture. And Drexel Atkinson was our county guy here on NRCS. And he called me one day and he said, I got a guy coming and I want you to spend a day with him. And I said, okay, that'll be fine. And it was Ray Archuleta, and he's still considered one of the leaders in regenerative agriculture. He's part of a group called Soil Health Consultants, LLC. Alan Williams is in that group. Gabe Brown's in that group, and I'm pretty sure all these names. I know Alan and Ray Archuleta. Ray actually lives over east of Springfield now. Anyway, so I spent the day with Ray, and I took him in the field across the road over here, and I said, we've been no-tilling this field for 20 years, just simply because it's rougher ground and, a little steeper, and we converted everything else to no-till about 8 years ago. And he said, what you're going to find, Dave? He says that's the first thing you do in the soil health ladder is go to no-till, no disturbance, or as little disturbance as possible. And then the next thing you do is you add cover crops in the off season, so you got something growing on that piece of dirt all the time. And he said,
for a definition, a cover crop is something you're not really going to harvest. It's just
that's correct.
So it'd be like a turnip or something.
It can be anything. It can be the cereal family. It can be brassicas. It can be legumes, clovers, and that type of thing. Anyway, I was talking with Drexel later, and I said, "Why'd you have me spend the day with him?" And he goes, "'Cause I know you would do something." Well, Drexel and I have always been buddies, and he's been a really good mentor on this whole soil health thing. And see, now he's the western part of the state soil health specialist.
I unfortunately interrupted your discussion about Ray Archuleta. He said the first thing you're going to see is that you're going to, whenever you do this, you'll have no disturbance of the soil. And then I think there was a progression.
Okay,
there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, I cut off there.
I wanted to define cover crops for the audience.
Let's talk about that ladder of regenerative ag and soil health.
Right. Okay, before we start, regenerative ag. Can you define regenerative ag for people?
Okay, well, that's a real good question, Chris. And I'm on the Farmer Advisory Board for the Center for Regenerative Agriculture at MU. It's part of the Extension Division. And they knew that I'd been practicing these soil health and regenerative techniques for quite a while. And so they called me and said, would you be on this first board that we're forming this center, and we want input from producers and what. So one of the very first Zoom meetings, there were probably about 20 of us on the meeting, and they said the last question. Rob Myers, the head of the center, and he's good. He's very good, and the center has actually exceeded all my expectations of what it could be. I thought that's all we need, yet another deal up at Mizzou, And I went to Mizzou, and anyway. Defining regenerative ag. That was the question. Yes. The last question at the end of this deal. He goes, would you all share with me your definition of regenerative agriculture? And everybody, it's no-till, cover crops, blah, 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 back and forth. And I was the last one. And I said, well, this may be a little controversial, but in my opinion, you don't go to truly regenerative until you involve the grazing animals. And it got real quiet. And all of a sudden, this guy from North Missouri, Charlie, he goes, I agree with Dave. And that's what Ray said. He said, you'll gain so much from no-till, and you'll gain more increased soil health, permeability, aggregation, all the good things with soil, with cover crops. But he said, when you integrate the grazing animals, it's going to blow your mind how things change. And see, this was after my learning period of this. So we started immediately with cover crops. And I got a hold of this place just south of this original ranch. It borders us along the road there, on the gravel road. And it had fencing adjacent to the crop fields. And my first grazing year on cover crops was the 2016-17, the winter of 2016-17. And it just was phenomenal how good the cattle did. Just the gains were unbelievable. And
What did you plant for your cover crop that year?
it just simplistic, just a little rye, and I don't know if we had much else in there. We probably had crimson clover and rye, and maybe one or two other species. And
Really had good yields.
oh, the cattle we had 200 stalkers on there, and it was just something to watch them graze, and they gained over 3 pounds a day on that.
Wow.
And so we just kept doing it. And the third year of that, after the third year of grazing, Indigo Ag, I got an email, and it said, we know you're practicing regenerative techniques. Would you like to enter our carbon cup, our contest, to see who's sequestering the most carbon? And all this kind of stuff, I'm open to about anything because I want to learn from it.
Sure.
In this contest, I thought, well, I'll at least learn how they measure carbon, and how the sampling goes and everything. So right before Christmas in 2019, they came to the field, and I'd staked out 15 acres was the entry. And then that didn't hear from them, and of course COVID started, but in the meantime, Tanya and I, we were really getting amped up in this conservation movement. I had signed on I was the first, and there again, I didn't know what I was getting into, but it just sounded like a good idea. It's what how I wanted to run this place. Max Alliger with MDC was the prairie specialist for MDC back then, and we'd been rehabbing prairie fields, old CRP fields, and we were rehabbing true remnants. And he said, we're looking at a project of certifying habitat and particularly bird-friendly grazing systems, and Audubon is going to give a certification for conservation ranching. But it hadn't been fleshed out yet.
Which is wonderful for you. We haven't even talked a little bit about your hunting yet, but that's a big part of your life as well.
It always has been a big part of my life. In fact, remind me where we're at right here, and I'll step back. Back in the 80s when things were so gruesome, I signed up every acre I could get, every non-productive acre in our row cropping, like pivot corners. We'd had the drought of 80, which was devastating. I signed up pivot corners, by the stream buffers. This is before all these specialty programs had come in. I just, and I didn't know that I was actually practicing the concept called precision agriculture. You take out all the non-performing acres and put them into, water filter strips, wildlife-friendly strips, and quite frankly, mainly using native warm season grasses, big blue, little blue, and all that. So over our whole operation, I had accumulated 400 plus acres of CRP, but it was like around this house, these fields weren't very productive. This was an old rental farm, and pivot corners, et cetera, and I was seeing the wildlife benefit. It was just
So you made a hunting paradise for yourself.
I was making a hunting paradise. It was we were killing all the big deer in these tall grass fields and stuff, and all the neighbors were putting up stands on the fence line on our tall grass fields, and so that dovetails back into this. I get this email, and it said, "Congratulations, you're the Missouri State champion of the inaugural Indigo Ag Carbon Cup." And
did they send you a cup?
It's there in the mantle. We ought to go get it and put it on the film, because it is the cheesiest looking trophy I've ever seen. It looks like a chia pet. It's like a cup and it's been sprayed, and it's got this fuzzy stuff all over it.
All right. Well, we do need to go get it then.
But it says Indigo Ag Carbon Cup. We'll do that to finish off the deal. And but anyway, the down and dirty of it was, in 3 years, of grazing cover crops, I had doubled the organic matter in that field. I'd gone from like around 1.5 and almost to 3.
So how do they judge that? Do they do a soil test and then do a soil test at the end of that, or how do they?
No. They can do a test that sees how much carbon is in the soil right then.
Oh, okay.
And then they said we had like 49 tons of carbon sequestered per acre. Well, the theoretical maximum's like 50.
Wow.
So, but this was just 3 years of this.
Yeah.
You know, now we've been doing it 13 years.
Right.
You know, and so.
And are you done spraying stuff like glyphosate or?
No, we've not gone that far yet, but we minimize the use of everything, and we're a lot more flexible on our herbicide rotations. And what we found with these cover crops is the first thing you do is you diminish soil movement. You know, when you got cover all the time, you got less runoff, you got less chemicals, you got less nutrients going down the creek.
Sure.
And plus you're keeping your soil.
Yep.
Okay, well that's just the first bit of help. What we found is, and there again, it was all these things that I was doing where I was seeing a synergistic blending of everything we were doing. It was starting to make sense to me. In learning to work on these native prairies, what you learn about when you work with native prairies is diversity. Because by definition, they're the most diverse ecosystems in the world. Chris, the world record for plant diversity is down south of E Highway on Pennsylvania Prairie, just a mile from our place.
Oh, no kidding. The world record.
The world record. These biologists, it's, you know how birders have records, all these people in these eco-friendly pursuits, you know, there's always a world record or a challenge to do. Well, these biologists have been going around to these Missouri prairies down here, and the world record is a competition in 1/4 of a square meter. You know how big that is?
About a square foot, yeah.
Yeah, it's very small. 47 species, I think it is, right down here on Pennsylvania Prairie, which maybe that's a nerd thing, but to me, it's the most exciting thing because I actually am restoring these old prairies, and someday maybe I'll have a world record. You know, I mean, it's just it's just a blast. And my guys, like you said, I was really into hunting.
Well, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Can you give me a 2-sentence or less definition of regenerative farming? Or regenerative ag? Okay.
Well, it's minimal disturbance
Of the soil.
Keeping growing plants year-round.
Okay.
And see what you're doing there. You're harvesting sunlight, you're harvesting energy, and these plants are feeding the microbiome, the soil, the biology of the soil. I may as well bring it up right now. In 2023, I got the Missouri Soil Conservationist of the Year award.
I know.
And from the Conservation Federation of Missouri, and what I talked about when I got that award was, you know, all these years we thought farming was just chemistry. All the soil tests you get at the normal labs, all it is a chemical analysis.
Right.
It's biology. It's not chemistry. The chemistry can enhance the balance to get you to the biology, but it's the biology that really makes the soil flourish. And what happens when you get the biology right, and what we found there, again, going back to this diversity concept, all of our cover crops are 6 to 8 species mix. We'll have cereals, brassicas, and legumes, those 3 families. And what you get from putting those 3 families together is a very diverse microorganism deal going in your soil. And basically, when soil gets healthy, one day I was talking with Drexel, and I said, Drexel, besides doing all these exotic tests that cost big money, to check the biology of your soil, how can you tell that you're making it healthier and sequestering it? And I knew about the rainfall simulator and aggregation, and that type of thing. But I said, how can you tell that you're sequestering carbon? And he said, well, Dave, I don't want to sound like a smartass, but he says it just keeps getting blacker. And he's right. I mean, I can take you right now and show you some of our cover crop fields, and they're the blackest fields around. And that's carbon. And the Carbon Cowboys, all these guys, I've started trying to follow them on the web, and the regenerative ag groups. And we're finding this works everywhere in this country, from one end of the country to the other. And
do you foresee a time where you can run your whole operation without glyphosate or pesticide?
We might be able to someday. I mean, there are guys that are doing it. We do use some poultry litter as part of our mix, and they've proven that using any kind of manure with bacteria in it, speeds up the process. It feeds the microbiome a little bit more. And
do you still put stuff like nitrogen out of a bulk fertilizer plant?
Yes, we actually use anhydrous.
Okay.
And that's supposed to kill the biology of the soil. And I've really watched that, and we use a no-till system to put the anhydrous in. But you'll see the earthworms move away from the slot.
Okay.
But 10 days later, they're back.
Okay.
And that was another interesting thing about healthy soil. When we started all this stuff, we thought we were going to have to buy 55-gallon drums full of earthworms and seed the soil. It's so simplistic when you make things healthy. And I'm learning this not just in the soil, but in the plant selection and the habitat we're making and everything. It's the old deal, if you build it, they will come. If you give the habitat for the right biology in the soil, the worms will be there. And
do you think you can bring quail back?
We're 5 times greater quail numbers on this property than when we started with Audubon. And that was another thing. Let's go back to the Audubon deal a minute.
I'm gonna pause here for a bathroom break. All right, so before we carry on, we're back. This thing is surprisingly heavy. And as promised, the Indigo Carbon Cup state winner. What is that?
Oh, it's just that spray on. I call it the Chia Pet Trophy.
The Chia Pet Trophy. So those of you that are just on the audio version, it is a very heavy block of wood with a fuzzy green pedestal and a blue
trophy
enamel cup. Yeah. An enamel-coated stainless cup. But still, hey, that's fantastic. Congratulations.
Well, when I brag about winning that cup, I always smile and say, I don't know if 2 people entered that contest or 200 entered the contest. So
it might be.
But here's one thing I learned from that contest is I looked at all the state winners, and they were highly variable. I mean, some states were a little less than what we did. A lot of states were more than what we did. The national champion was a grazer in Alabama, I think it was, and he had started out this small operation. I think it was a couple hundred acres, and he was doing the super intensive rotational grazing, and he was using some real productive coastal type grass that responds to the rain they get down there. But he had bought some old worn out cotton plantation, and he had increased the organic matter in that by doing that super intensive mob grazing, and like frequent moves, daily moves, 5.6 or 8 percent of organic matter on a sandy type soil. That's phenomenal. I mean, that's just unheard of, And,
it really shows something, doesn't it?
It just shows that we have the techniques now. But what it also shows is the good Lord showed us how to do this. The grazing animals are integral to building soil. It's that simple. It's not a mystery. We've proven it. And there's something about the overall biology and the way the ground is manipulated with the hooves and everything else. And when we started this, I used to just be on pins and needles every time it rained. And I go, oh my gosh, we're going to wreck this field. And a couple of years, once we got used to it, and a couple of years, we probably overdid it a little bit, but we never really saw a bad effect in the crop field. Yep. And see, all these fields would, after the cover crop, we'd graze it, and then we'd kill it, or sometimes we'd plant right in it if everything had worked just right, and then plant, and it would save you a whole chemical application, because the cattle had done the removal of the.
Well, my dad is a poster child for rotational grazing in New Mexico. I think his smallest pasture is 250 acres, and it's 40 acres for a cow to raise a calf. So a very incredibly different kind of soil and plant and everything he's dealing with. But the things he's done with his property, when it's become drought resistant in a very droughty part of the world. And then Cameron and Jacqueline, my daughter and her husband, they're doing regenerative on our farms. And so they haven't sprayed a single chemical in, I think, about 7 years now, maybe 6. But anyway, the diversity, like we're seeing bugs we never saw before and plants we never saw before. And every year we see different wildflowers. Like we'll see a purple or yellow flower we have never seen before just because we got rain on March 1st instead of March 10th or whatever. It's been pretty neat watching.
Did your dad happen to go to any Savory?
Oh yeah, no,
he's an Alan Savory fan.
And he's hosted several things, and he really is a poster child in northern New Mexico. So the NRCS and the USDA, whatever the form is out there, they are always calling my dad and say, "Hey, we want to do this program," and he says, "All right, we'll try it." But I think he has 200 cows on his ranch, and they're in their 80s, and there's like 70 miles of fence on this ranch, so it's a lot of ground, And my mom and him will go to a corner of a pasture and blow a whistle, and 200 cows and their calves will walk by into the next pasture, and he's able to manage his ranch in a way that I would have never dreamed he'd be able to still do that with just him and my mom at their age. But because of the system that he's put in place, the system you put in place, the system Cameron Jacqueline put in place, it's unbelievable. And what you're describing isn't just on ground. You're describing the human body as well. If you get the biome corrected and you put in the right types of ingredients in the right way, you end up with a much better result.
Well, that's exactly right. And there's a bunch of buzzwords that are going to really come to the forefront. They're already on the forefront. And one of them is nutrient density.
Right.
And that applies to everything. It applies to the beef we produce. It applies to the corn and soybeans and every single thing that goes in your mouth. It can either be nutrient dense or it can be lacking in nutrients. And what happens when you're lacking in nutrients is you can get imbalances and not be nearly as healthy. And we've started testing. I might go back to let's go back to the when I signed up with the ranch certification of the Audubon project and what it entailed and we had to do, and then how that has gone through the way we look at everything else. I told you I learned a lot from the native grasslands and diversity and managing them. And when we signed up on this Audubon program, Tanya and I actually went to Dallas to the regional headquarters on the Trinity River. Audubon's the most powerful conservation group in the United States, the most members and everything else. And you'd say, well, why is a bird watching group, what does it have to do with conservation and every other thing? Bird populations are crashing, period. And the bird watchers notice this. It's way different once you see at your bird feeder at your house. When you get into these larger ecosystems, these prairie ecosystems, the ranching ecosystems out west, and these where we row crop and everything, things have gotten out of whack. There's just no habitat for the birds. And the prairie species are suffering the most of any group. And so we went down and we told them what we thought producers could live with. And they put together this program, and then it just sat there for a year or two. And
So by what they could live with, meaning,
it was a certification program.
okay,
Audubon was proposing to put a certification program together, and what they were going to do is they were going to use a third-party verifier, and they were going to come and look at your ranching operation, and if it left habitat for birds and you were increasing the targeted species, in this case the prairie bird species, then this third-party verifier would come and look at how much grass you had left through the winter and everything else and keep you certified. And consequently, you could sell that beef as grazed on certified bird-friendly land.
okay,
Got the sign over there.
all right.
And but there were a lot of little subtleties in the management that, I mean, I was learning a lot of this stuff on the fly, you know. And one of the things they came up with is no ivermectin, which ivermectin is the parasite control that's the most popular in the United States by far, because it works. It's good. But it's toxic to a dung beetle. And I go, so we're changing our parasite control just to help a dung beetle survive. And at first I thought, well, it's part of the protocol. Great, but we'll do it. We had to buy Sidectin back when we first started, and it was 3 or 4 times the cost of ivermectin. Now it's gone generic, and it's reasonable. We do a rotation. We use Sidectin, and then we do a flush. 2 times a year we'll do one or the other, or 1 time a year, one or the other. Anyway, we got about 4 years into this Audubon program, and I noticed all the paddocks were getting more lush and looking better, and looking at the soil. And then we burn, these native grasses. We burn them most years, and I would look on some fields, and we'd burn, and there'd not be a cow pile in sight. Except maybe on a rocky spot or a
Right.
ridge or something. And then I started looking at all the neighbors, and those cow piles just sit out
Everywhere.
there like crowns, on top of that bare fescue.
Yep.
And you can see them. And so we started looking, and it took about 4 years, but our dung beetle population is absolutely through the roof. Well, dung beetles evolved with the prairies and the grasslands and the grazing animals, and they are what makes that circle complete of this. The cattle are nipping off the plants use the carbon dioxide. The cattle graze it down. A cow pile is just about as dark as a thing as you'll see. It's almost black. That's because it's full of carbon. And what makes this whole circle perfect is you got this little beetle that'll dismantle that cow pile and bury it. That's way better than plowing it in or knifing it in or any other physical thing you could do. And he's doing all the work. So Audubon, this is kind of a showplace for Audubon because it was the first ranch in the country to be certified as an Audubon Conservation Ranch.
Oh, cool, huh?
Real cool. I didn't realize we were number 1 till one day we were talking. Chris goes, "No, you were the first. Nobody else would try it, and you did it." Now Audubon owned some ranches and had interest in some that had been trying these techniques in the Dakotas and stuff, but we were the first private ranch in the country to be certified.
Have you been to Africa yet?
No, I have not been to Africa.
So in South Africa, if you go to Kruger Park, which is a famous, or even Pillansburg,
And that's where Alan Savory's from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. If you go by somewhere where an elephant has pooped, there is hundreds of dung beetles rolling up balls and pushing them away, and you can watch it happen. You can just see it's almost like ants attacking the grasshopper with all the dung beetles that are moving elephant poop. So it's happening in wild places that there's no spraying of anything in Kruger Park.
Sure.
And
And
so-
hasn't been for 180 years or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then that is one thing we're seeing too is dung beetles on our property that, and it's amazing and wonderful.
This was a concept that was ahead of its time, this Audubon certification. I will say this about the Audubon deal, as long as you stay certified and allow the third-party verifier to come and check you out and everything, it doesn't cost you a dime.
Nice.
Now, the Savory Institute does a certification, and it's considered the ultimate, but you got to be a big ranch to absorb it. It's $11,000 a pop.
Oh, man.
To be certified by the Savory Institute. And as we've gotten into doing grass-finished animals, we're learning all these little programs and what's going on and the different certifications. We're looking at a more stringent certification so we can be a whole food supplier for their branded natural beef.
Well, let's go back to the nutrient dense.
Okay, nutrient density.
So if you took a pig out of a industrial situation or a pig out of the timber and compared the pork chop, they would have a very different nutrient density, wouldn't they?
Well, let's have a disclaimer here in this cast right now that Tanya and I are addicted to the pork produced on Chris's daughter and son-in-law's place, and we only eat pasture pork and we only eat grass-finished animals from our deal. And it's, Chris, we've been sending meat samples and to Utah State. And Mizzou just is in the middle of finishing a $35 million meat slab. Surely they're going to have the technology to do this compound analysis of these samples. But we sent samples to Utah State, and it's like night and day. You'd think, how could there be differences in animals just simply because of what they ate?
Right.
There's differences in us, between us, because of what we eat.
Right.
Absolutely. You can tell the people that aren't eating properly, and you can tell the people that are eating wisely. And these cattle, if given the opportunity, will always eat wisely. They do it instinctively. When they found all these compounds, the overwhelming thing, and that's been big in the headlines lately, is we're way deficient on omega-3s, that amino acid. Most Americans are deficient in omega-3s. They figured that there would be a difference, but they didn't realize how radical it was. On the forage-finished beef, they're finished on these Missouri native warm season grass pastures, and that's the samples we sent them. The omega-3 to 6 ratio is 5 or 6 to 1.
Wow.
Omega-3s dominate 5 or 6 to 1 over the 6s. You won't believe this. In the feedlot samples they got, it's the exact opposite. The omega-6s dominate the 3s 4 or 5 to 1.
Wow.
So that was the overwhelming thing. But he said, this Professor Van Luft, he's a Dutch guy, he goes, the surprising thing is we found all these phytonutrients. And phytonutrients are just little small groupings of nutrients, but they've displayed the ability to impart health to the whoever consumes these nutrients. They're healthy nutrients, in other words, but they just add a small piece to the overall healthy attributes of the meat. But a lot of phytonutrients, like they had a list. And what I got the biggest kick out of is, he said, and we found a compound that resembles vanilla. And I just almost dropped my pen. I'm going, for years, our family, I've hunted a lot, elk, deer, pheasant, etc. And we ate game meat and ducks and waterfowl, the whole gamut.
Everything could be hunted.
And I always said elk was one of my favorite meats.
Yep.
And I described it as a very clean tasting meat and an almost sweet note. And then when we started doing these totally forage finished beef animals, I started detecting that sweet note. I wasn't dreaming it up. it's there
it's a
because
vanilla
of it's
note.
that vanilla note is in that meat, and the discussion, used to grass finished even 5 years ago. They go, oh yeah, most people can't stand the taste. They're used to feedlot beef, blah blah blah. Now it's like a subtlety thing that now the chefs and the big mucky mucks are saying, oh, some of this grass-fed beef, it has flavor compounds that are just indescribable, and they're just a treat to your palate and all this bull, and
healthy.
And healthy.
Yeah.
But it's and there it goes. Our animals are healthier, Chris. Part of the Audubon protocol, we can't be certified on an animal that's had antibiotics or
Right.
any kind of growth hormone or anything. And last year, our group of steers averaged, for all you cattle guys that are listening, we ended up finishing in that 26 to 27 month range, and the live weight average was around 1225 to 1250, and the hanging carcass weight was in that 725 range, and the yield was 61.5% average
So fantastic.
on all the animals.
Yeah.
And what we're finding here, and I brought up the term synergies. Just all this stuff we were changing on this property at the same time. We were going to regenerative on our row crops. We were growing cover crops. We were getting more and more acres of native warm season grass, and that was a requirement to be part of Audubon. You had to have a third of your forage land at least in native warm season grass. So we're way past that now. We're over 50%. In fact, I'm stockpiled fescue. That's how we use fescue. We stockpile it all summer, and then right now we're using it, without being in a bale.
Right.
And this synergy thing is, we think we can do a superior job of finishing animals on forage here, and the cover crops are a vital part of that. And what we found with the cover crops, several years before we were trying to forage finish, we were just getting stockers and taking them through to that 850, 900 pound range. And but what we found was, if they had anywhere from 3 or 4 weeks to 90 days on cover crops in the spring before they went on the warm season grass, it was just like it turbocharged the whole grazing season. We had several years where we had, the first year I really noticed the native warm season grasses and the cover crop combination. We got some 5 weights in February, about now, and we shipped them as 900 pounders in August.
Wow.
And they had averaged 2 1/4 a day.
And no corn or nothing. Just
No, nothing but forage, and it was the cover crops and native warm season grass, and it was through some of the toughest periods of the year.
Yeah,
through all of February and March.
Yeah. Well, and also to gain that kind of weight during July and August.
Well, that's what we're finding. We're starting to measure a lot more, and when we go paddock to paddock, we've concentrated our deal here on this operation where we can move cattle, just by pulling the whistle, and having them follow you, so we don't have to truck them around much. But I've had multiple years of cover crops where it was over 3 pounds, and I actually had a group of 65 head that gained 5 pounds a day on the cover crops.
Wow.
And that year they gained 5 pounds a day on the cover crops, and we put them on the native warm season grass, and they averaged 3 pounds a day on that for the duration through the summer.
Incredible.
A lot of I talk to guys that go to the Flint Hills, and that's what they expect. They expect that 2.5 to 3 pounds, and they consider it a pretty good year if they get 2.8 a day, you know. And And we can replicate anything the Flint Hills can do right here in Dade County.
That's fantastic.
And I say some of our rangeland looks like the Flint Hills. You got those rocky outcroppings. Well, that's what saved it. And in all this conversion and everything, we've really learned a lot of good techniques on restoring remnants. Mm-hmm. And that is you talk about a thrill. It's the first big remnant we got fully restored is east of the corral here. There's a big ridge there. It's about 200 total acres. And so we cleared brush for a couple of years. And so we got the brush cleared, and we had been burning. And we actually had a rest year where we rested it for a year. And then one year we burned early, like in the next week or two, in February, early. Okay. And we had a really nice spring. It wasn't too cold, but yet we had just the right amount of moisture, and the fescue just greened up perfectly. And you'd thought on this old prairie remnant that how much fescue could have been in there. It had never been overseeded or anything, but it was amazing, when it greened up, you could see it was just sparsely throughout the whole place, 200 acres. So we sprayed a mixture of glyphosate and a Masapic. We did a quart of glyphosate and 10 ounces of a Masapic, which is plateau or panoramic. And it was we verified that none of the warm season was even thinking about sprouting. I mean, this was in March.
Okay.
So we fly this on, and the fescue might have been 4 inches, but you could see the green cast, and flew it on, and all this, and just slowly, ever so slowly, it was cool, yet, and that, all of a sudden it just got this golden cast. Well, that was all the fescue starting to die. And see, a Masapic, it not only will help kill the fescue, it has a residual on seedling fescue. And a Masapic, it was developed, it's the warm season grasses are called C4 grasses, and then the cool seasons are C3. And the Masapic, the C4s are resistant to it.
Okay.
It doesn't bother them. And by doing it early like that, all the native forbs and everything you mentioned about your father's farm, about all these different plants and forbs you see, the verdancy and the completeness of these remnants, we did a pre-spray. Biologists came and identified 47 species on this remnant, on these 200 acres. And so we sprayed it, and we grazed it that year, and like you said, every year's different. When we've got pictures and videos of, you never know what's going to happen. One year we had an explosion of purple coneflowers just everywhere. It was like a sea of them, and that's on one of my videos. Bird Friendly Beef, Dade County, a landowner video on MDC's website. And we're driving through these seas of coneflowers. Next year, there wasn't a coneflower on the place.
It's really crazy.
They were all black-eyed Susans, and the yellow flowers, anything that was yellow was erupting the next year.
Yeah.
And it just shows how we call this the latent seed bank. And those seeds had been there. This farm's probably been grazed about 100 years. And it was kind of managed pretty good for several years, and then the last 10 it had been grazed to death.
Before you got it.
But you rest it, and you get the exotics, the fescue, the introduced species out, and give it some time, and it's just shocking what you'll get. It's just, and these are the grasslands that are the habitat for the quail. The turkeys are thriving here. There's been a big dip in the turkey population.
Yep.
Not on this place. We had our 100-bird flock down on the creek this year. I mean, it's and the quail, as I told Chris earlier, since we've been in the Audubon program, the Missouri River Bird Observatory, I think they're in their 12th year of monitoring this place. And all the prairie species are increasing. The quail are 5 times more than what we started with. And I really think we can fine tune, and we're learning more and more about quail habitat all the time. And I'm hoping we can double that 5 times and get it 10 times back to the way it was. Back in the 70s, this place, when we first got a hold of it, 8 or 10 covey day was not a big deal here.
I used to hunt a lot in the late 80s and early 90s over by Pittsburgh, Kansas. And you get your limit pretty much any day you hunt it. And now you're lucky to see a covey in a week, at least in our part of the world.
It's subtle. They like to blame it on predators and every other thing, but it is habitat.
Yep.
I was on the habitat stage at Pheasant Fest in Kansas City last year, and in preparation for that my 30 minutes on the stage every day, I went around taking pictures this time of year in February, and basically I didn't have to travel far. I just took pictures of our place and then kind of shot the camera across the fence, and quite frankly, there is not a speck of habitat in any fescue pasture in Dade County right now. You've seen them; they're all nubbed to the ground.
Yeah.
And these native grasslands, that field where you came in by the lane.
Yep.
There's good habitat there, right? Well, the bulls have been in there all fall.
Oh, really?
And they've been nipping out the fescue around the edges and any place the fescue's coming up, and they've totally left the native alone. So they haven't hurted the habitat at all. They've actually gotten the good out of what fescue was there. We used to be almost neurotic about killing every last blade of fescue, and now we realize it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's certain times of the year where they'll get that harvested for us, and it's a good soil stabilizer, and we like it in our high traffic areas, like down along the creek where we move cattle back and forth over this property. We actually fertilize fescue, and we put on all of our fescue. We put on at least 10 or 11 pounds of Korean Lespedeza and a pound of Lanino every year. That's our main fertility program on our fescue.
Okay.
And it's amazing how many years you'll have those spring floods, and all of a sudden it gets hot in the summer, and that Lespedeza just comes on. And I've seen cattle where we had to move back on the fescue. The natives pretty well slow down by the end of August.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my guys I said, are they hurting our stockpile? And they go, no, they're eating the Lespedeza and they're leaving the fescue alone. So our stockpile on those same areas, there again, there's a synergy there. The legumes help the fescue be healthier and grow. And a lot of times the cattle will eat the legumes right out of the fescue and still leave your fescue for stockpile.
Huh. Well, you have given us a tremendous amount of information, and I can't believe we haven't talked about bow hunting.
Bow hunting. Do you see my pictures up there?
Oh, yeah.
I was,
But wait, hold on 1 second. So
Yeah.
you shoot a traditional bow. You don't shoot a compound bow, right?
correct.
And one of your...
I used to.
Oh.
And now I can't pull back a traditional bow that I shot before.
Okay. But you used to do target practice with a tennis ball swinging on a string. I was always amazed at that. And
I think you walked in one day, our restroom is right there.
Yeah.
And you said, what's this deal?
yeah.
And that was a Byron Ferguson trick I learned. And, that was almost an obsession. One winter, I got into that. And in this building, I could go back to 30 yards.
Right.
And I learned, I shot competitive sporting clays for about 10 years, which is an eye-hand deal, and that's more of an instinctive type thing. You don't aim. And the traditional archery, it was strictly instinctive.
Both eyes open?
Yeah, both eyes open and no sights, no nothing. And anyway, one year it was my workout. I'd go and I'd start at the 10-yard mark, and one night I went out there, and it just proved to me how sometimes your eyes are working great, sometimes they don't always work as great. I went out there and 10 yards center punched that swinging tennis ball, and it was swinging.
Right.
And I stepped back to 15 yards, and I swung it, center punched the tennis ball. Went back to 20 yards. Same thing. I made it to 25 yards and center punched it, and I
One right after the
quit.
other.
I quit. I said, I'll never be able to do this again. Well, that year, I've shot in my buddies and I have had a team down at Peppers between Joplin and Carthage, and we shoot 10 weeks of trap and 10 weeks of skeet every summer. It's just a blast. We have a great time. And that year, from that eye training all winter with that bow, out of 75 shooters, I missed first place by one clay target on the trap. I got second in trap.
So it really carried over.
It carried over.
Yeah. Man.
When you get your eye shot, my daughter was an all-state class volleyball and basketball player, and she never wanted to shoot with me, And I taught her she came back after college, and that was a way to hang out with Dad. Plus, she liked the dogs, and but her eyes were good. She had the reflexes and everything. And she's just every lodge, every trip we've ever been on, that she's the talk of the deal by the time we leave, because I got outshot by a girl, and
But would you tell us the story of your most favorite bow hunt?
Okay. I want to say one thing about all this stuff that I'm doing. I do a lot of forums. I'm going to D.C. at the end of February to talk to all the legislatures and everything. The nationwide migratory bird joint venture is having me come out there as a producer that wants to talk about habitat and the farm bill, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice.
I feel like giving back from all the help I've gotten on this, from the Conservation Department, from NRCS, everything else. That's been a big help. We wouldn't have achieved all this stuff in the amount of time we've done it without it. But my ethic, I've reread the Sand County Almanac several times, Aldo Leopold, and that's what led me to do traditional archery, because he talks about, our weapons and things that's gonna be an issue. He wrote all this stuff in the 30s and the 40s, how technology is just gonna make it exercise to execute animals, and you don't really get to be a part of the system and be involved. But back to your favorite bow hunt, that bull elk on the bottom there, we had been hunting hard for 3 or 4 days in New Mexico, up above Gallup, on Mount Taylor. You ever heard of Mount Taylor?
I wasn't raised by Gallup.
Yeah, and no, it's actually back east of Gallup a little bit. Yeah, it'll come off. Anyway, we had hunted hard for several days, and we had kind of, in the middle of the day, things all of a sudden, the bugling calmed down and everything, and so we went in for a break, and we came back out, and I mean, they were fired up. You know what it's like to be in the mountains with elk bugling. There's nothing like it. And so all of a sudden, there was all this commotion, and I was out in the open, and they had been logging on this place. It's a 25,000 acre ranch in New Mexico, and so here was a stump, and there was a brush pile right behind the stump, but the stump was wide and right out in the open. So I sit on the stump, and I raised my little Black Widow stick bow in front of my face, and of course I was all painted up and everything, and I just sat there quiet, and I had the wind, and this bull ran right out in the opening right in front of me at 28 yards. I know exactly 28 yards. Anyway, he just gave me the stare down, and I've got that bow in front of my eyes, and I'm not even looking at him. You don't eyeball them when they're that, and I'm just saying, boy, it'd sure be nice now if a bull on the other ridge would bugle. And I no more than thought that, and this bull on the other ridge bugle. So here he is broadside at 28 yards.
And turns his head.
And he turns his head 180 degrees looking the other way.
Oh, man.
And I brought that bow up. I don't think it hardly touched my cheek, when I let go. And when I saw that arrow disappear behind his front leg, and I heard it clank on the rocks.
Wow. It went right through him.
When we field dressed him, it missed the ribs going in and going out. It was a big Magnus, those big wide traditional two-blade.
Got both lungs.
Right above the heart, both lungs.
Oh, man.
And he stumbled. He turned around and he looked like a fly had buzzed him. And he stumbled like he was drunk, and he took about 20 steps down the hill and just collapsed.
Wow.
And the guy that was with me says, I've seen at least 100 bull kills, and I've never seen one die that easy, that quick.
Kidding.
And
he's massive, too. What did he weigh, do you know?
About 700.
Gee.
And that was a great trip. I got caught in a frenzy with another big bull and was crawling across the open space. And there's animals stampeding all around me and everything. And all of a sudden it got quiet. And all of a sudden I hear something walk right over to me, and I go, man, this may have been a stupid move. And all of a sudden this wet nose is under the bill of my cap, and it was a calf.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And archery, traditional archery, and getting that close to animals. I had a bull one time. We were going in at lunchtime, and we heard him bugle, and we called back to him, and you could tell he was coming. You know how they just make, it sounds like cattle running.
Yeah.
There's kicking dirt, and he comes running over the ridge and we were on a real steep side slope game trail coming up it, and he's coming down, and I've got an arrow knocked, and I'm in the front, and I actually had a video guy over my shoulder, and that bull got within 6 yards, and when he stopped, he kicked dirt all over us. and it was a standoff. His head was down, and all I could see was his rack, and he was a nice bull, 6x6, but I couldn't shoot a head-on elk.
Right.
Well, how they just can go over terrain like you can't believe it when you look at it afterwards. He went straight down that hill, and I didn't even think about it. But I'd done all this tennis ball bull and all this stuff, and so I just instinctively just drew and fired, and you could hear it on the DVD. It went and it hit a little 2-inch aspen, center punched it right when it would have hit him.
Oh,
and
man.
The videographer, we took that back, and we watched it that night, and of course my guide, the words he used after all that excitement couldn't be put on film, so. But I never did get a copy of that. He was filming for Drury Outdoors, and he said, I'm sorry, this is proprietary. I can't get a copy of that. But I had about a half a dozen witnesses that it did happen. But
there's a little aspen.
But, to get that close to that magnificent animal,
Yeah.
and New Mexico, there's huge areas of New Mexico that are primitive weapon only.
Yep.
Muzzleloader or archery only.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
And that big mule deer was in Alberta.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that was on Cabela's Sportsman's Quest. We were on a trip, and I get this call from the guide, and he told me, he said, when you leave, Jay Novacek's coming, and we're going to film an episode of Cabela's Sportsman's Quest. And this is up way out in the country east of Calgary in Alberta. So he calls me, he said, Dave, he said, can we use pictures of you and that animal on the television show? And I said, are you kidding? I said, of course, go ahead. And he said, Jay flung arrows all week and never hit a thing. And he says, so we're going to show Jay's hunt and your mule deer, and that was a highlight too. Yeah. But no, that Tanya and I went to a Leopold Symposium in Madison a couple of summers ago, and just that whole ethic he calls it a wildlife or a wilderness ethic. And I didn't realize how firmly that impressed on me. And see, in college, the second edition of the first paperback edition of a Sand County Almanac came out while I was in college. And there was a copy featured in the bookstore, and I bought it and read it the first time then. And I've read it 3 or 4 times since.
This is Sand County?
Sand County Almanac.
Okay.
So when we went to the symposium, we went out to the shack that he had in Sand County and saw where he wrote a lot and hung out and deer hunted and stuff
Cool.
like that. But and my dad had a conservation ethic. He always frowned, when guys fall plowed and plowed with the hill, and he'd see dirt in the ditch and it'd just disgust him, and stuff. And all the snow-till and everything, he was always 100% behind it. Yeah. But and plus, I was very fortunate to grow up around all these remnants. The Stony Point butts up to us on the north side. That's almost 1,000 acres of public prairie. And Hiawatha's across the road from us, south of here. That's a 320, we've learned we're in the process of restoring 100 acres worth of remnants, 3 paddocks right now, and the biologist came and she found 95 species.
Wow!
So she said this is definitely worth rehabbing. And you know what? 2 of the fields didn't have a lot of fescue incursion. The one field was full of fescue, so we did just straight Amasapic with crop oil, methylated crop oil last year, and it zapped the fescue, and we're going to do a cleanup treatment on it. But the 2 that didn't need chemical treatment, we burned them and left them, and we rested them for the whole year. And I was up in that field for the first time here last week, and it was like driving through clouds of meadowlarks. Meadowlarks, everybody says, oh, we still have meadowlarks. We have a fraction of the eastern meadowlarks that we had when I was a kid. We used to have clouds of them. That field, there must have been hundreds in that field.
How cool.
I just went around the field, and they were just getting up, and you know how they just kind of bop up and drop down, and so there again, the habitat, that year of rest, you wouldn't believe how that native, a bunch of it, the big blue through seed heads, and the growth was phenomenal. It was really where the ground was a little better shape. There again, that one will benefit tremendously from when we get the dung beetles fired up there. And
man,
so I tell people that I just feel extremely fortunate at this stage to be able to do what I'm doing, and
well, you obviously have a huge passion for it.
Yeah, it's just fun, and the guys are out duck hunting right now, and they go, Dave, when are you going to get out there and hunt with us, And I said, well, I've got this today, and I had a deal yesterday, and we're going looking at more cattle tomorrow, and
so you're missing your duck hunt for this?
Oh yeah, this is important.
Well, man, I appreciate it. Well, sir, you've been a tremendous guest. Do you have a good suggestion for a title for this episode? Amazing grazing?
Adventures in conservation, I guess I would say. I got one link that they could look up. This when I was in college, I went on this canoe trip down on the Rio Grande. It was a really desolate part. In fact, they said it was one of the most remote spots in the country. Well, we had all these issues with the bus wreck and everything else, and it happened in '73. Well, in '23, it was the 50th anniversary of that trip, and that trip had been featured on the cover of the alumni magazine at Mizzou. So I called the alumni bunch and I said, this is the 50th anniversary of this trip, but it was also the start. My buddy and I started a group at Mizzou called Wilderness Adventures. And I've always been attracted to nature, and protecting it and everything else. And we would rent out canoes, kayaks, tents, rock climbing equipment, you name it, whatever it took to go enjoy the outdoors, you could rent it out for little or nothing from we were a student government supported deal, and that deal lasted for 35 years. But this, the link to look up is An Adventure for the Ages, Mizzou Show Me. It's the Mizzou alumni website deal, and that Adventure for the Ages, it shows the bus wreck thing and everything else on that trip. But I've just had a lifelong. We enjoy fly fishing. As probably Tanya and I spend
all over the country. I mean, you guys do a lot of travel, and she's always regaling me. So, she is my longest standing customer. We still do. I have her, and I have another gentleman, Gary Denny, who's been doing this since '94, but started her in '88. And so, she's got to watch me get old, and I've got to watch her grow up.
I've read that one book of yours.
Oh, my memoir?
Yeah, the memoir, and you did what I like to do is you can learn so much when you get to know the old hands and the pros in what you're trying to do. And I've always paid homage to the first guys and gotten to know them and stuff. And over the years, like kayaking in college, we actually went to a school where we got to paddle with the world champion for a week.
Kidding.
Just my brother and I, because nobody else in the school could keep up with him.
Man, I bet your kayak really accelerated.
Oh yeah. Well, we did the Grand Canyon. We did a lot of the wild rivers of the West, and what got us started in that is an econ professor we bummed around with. We paddled with a gentleman by the name of Roger Paris, or Roger Paris. And he did the first descents in almost every wild river in the West after World War II, and learned from him. When we went goose hunting on that trip where we killed the mule deer, and we hunted with the first champion of champions at Stuttgart, Sean Mann. So I like to seek out those pros and really learn the ins and outs of whatever we're doing.
You should take that and buy yourself a little recorder, start doing a podcast.
Well, we've talked about that. I'm just slowly getting my ducks in. Who was it? One of the guys were teasing me. He says, "You need to be an influencer, Dave."
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it would be incredible.
Well, if I could influence more people to adopt some of these regenerative techniques, I say on the YouTube videos on the Regenerative Center, I said, try it. Did you know they'll pay you $10,000 a year to put out cover crops?
No, I didn't.
Any individual in Missouri that has land or is managing land can get a $10,000 grant from the Center for Regenerative Agriculture. It's called the CRCL Circle Project. And there's still money in that. It's part of the IRA money. They got a $25 million grant.
Wow.
And now is the time to be trying these cover crops. And they have a regenerative grazing system grant. And everybody that's done it said it's. I'm going to see if I can get my son-in-law to sign up for that this year, because he's done grazing school and everything. And wow. It's all out there now. We've got the techniques, but you don't really learn them till you try them.
Yeah, I've been able to see a lot of your property for a long time, and it's always been a pleasure to be shooting for your wife and seeing you. And I only get to see you in periphery occasionally, but I can't thank you enough for sitting down with me for. Well, guess how long we've been going?
Well,
almost 2 hours.
2 hours.
Hour 45.
Well, Chris, it's always been a privilege to know you and your family, and you're the ultimate professional. I have respect. I don't care what endeavor you're in. Somebody that really works at being a real pro in their endeavors, and you're right up at the top there in your endeavors, and I have a lot of respect for you and your whole family, and obviously we agree with the direction your daughter and son-in-law are going with the natural meat production and that type of thing, and And we do enjoy the pork. I mean, the flavor profile is just
It's incredible.
Oh, it is. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I didn't really care about pork chops coming out of the grocery store, and now I almost prefer it to a steak. It's
Yeah.
incredible. But
One thing we're going to start doing, we're going to see if all this soil health deal, we're going to start doing nutrient testing, nutrient density testing on our soybeans and corn,
nice.
and just to see, not every year, but see what direction, if we're having an effect.
Yep.
And
Well, I don't doubt that you are.
You'd think you'd have to be,
You'd have to be. Yep.
and with the animals and.
Well, you said it earlier. God kind of put it together, and we've done nothing but mess it up. But if you kind of go back to that, it seems to be not only healthier for the plants and the animals, but for us ultimately.
Yeah, and no, obviously, and all this. There's just so much white noise out there, like when they talked about banning cattle and the methane from cattle and all that bull. I mean, it just makes you sick. But one thing I might add, I am on the board of Partnerscapes, and Partnerscapes, our mission statement says we are a landowner-led group that promotes collaboration between government agencies, NGOs, and whoever can help contribute to conservation work. We're for that, and we want to help show landowners what's available and how they can enhance their properties with all this conservation work. And
What was it called again? Partnership?
it was originally Partners for Conservation, and there was a web conflict, and they changed it. The web name is partnerscapes.org.
Partnerscapes.org.
Or is it .com? It's .org, I think. But anyway, we have Private Lands Partners Day every year, and in 2018 it was here. It was
nice.
we were one of the stops on the tour, and the question I had asked the most, they'd seen all the things we'd done on restoration and everything, and one of the questions was, if you wouldn't have had help from all the agencies and groups that helped you, how long would it have taken you to do this, and would you have done it? And my answer was, yes, it's what I wanted to do. But I said, it probably would have taken 3 or 4 times as long to get it done
Right.
without the help. And the other thing is the expertise of NRCS. And I work with a lot of these young, I got a quail biologist with Quail Forever coming Monday, spend half a day with me.
Nice.
And look at the techniques we're doing. He's a young guy, and we have a very active quail biologist network in Missouri, and there again, they help on habitat management and everything. And then Audubon, 2 weeks after that, the new Audubon manager that is going to assist ranchers with the program, she's going to come and stay with me, and so
Cool.
I like giving back to these people
You got a
that are
lot
helping
going
me.
on. Man, well, for you to take this time, I sure appreciate it. Sir,
Yeah, it's great.
it has been a real honor.
Thank you.